What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to this week's first full episode of the greatest podcast on turf. I'm Anthony.
I'm Ryan.
Today we're back with our Week 13 Fantasy Football Stardom Situm. Don't forget to like this video. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new. Literally, our subscriber to unsubscriber viewer ratio is
really bad.
97% of our viewers aren't subscribed.
All right.
So please subscribe. Ryan just fucked up the table, so if it looks whack, it's on Ryan. Yeah, like, subscribe, and Ryan's going to tell you guys about today's sponsor before we get into our picks.
Little Italy Pizzeria, best cheesesteaks, best pizza in all of Delaware. 2 locations, one of those being in Middletown, Delaware. The other one being in Townsend. Great family business, great food, great people, great prices. Be sure to come in and check it out. Let them know that the greatest podcast on turf sent you. They will take care of you. Show proof that you're subscribed, that you listen to us, and they will hook you up with an additional discount.
Yes,
also, check out our interview with Mr. Chase Arcangelo.
Check it out. Amazing interview. One of the favorite episodes we ever did.
Yes. Saturday. Yeah. Whatever the hell you want to say.
All right, starting off with my stardom quarterback of the week. It is one of my favorite players in the NFL, a guy who gets a lot of hate for no reason, Trevor Lawrence. In the last 3 games, Trevor Lawrence is 25 for 31, 80% completions, 235 yards, 1 touchdown. 29 for 40, 260 yards, 2 touchdowns. Then against Baltimore last week, he was 29 for 37, 300 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Going up against the Lions defense this week that is the worst in football. Yes, they are traveling to Detroit, but Trevor's been solid in fantasy through the past 3 weeks, 17, 21, and 25 fantasy points. That's good enough, especially if you have a guy like Kyler Murray who's on bye this week and you need to pick up a quarterback. You can't go wrong with a Trevor Lawrence. He's only rostered in 62% of leagues. So, yeah, that kind of hurts a little bit. But if you lost Kyler Murray and Trevor Lawrence is out there, go ahead and grab him. He's a great start this week. Statistically, Detroit is the number 1 defense giving up the most points to quarterbacks in fantasy football this year. So, Trevor Lawrence is a pretty safe, solid start this week going against Detroit. And he is a great streaming option if you have a quarterback that also has a bad matchup. Or if you're dealing with injuries, Justin Fields, Aaron Rodgers, guys of that nature. So go ahead and start Trevor Lawrence this week.
My quarterback start this week, it isn't as upper echelon as Trevor Lawrence, but it is the guy that he's playing against, and that is Jared Goff going up against Jacksonville. Jacksonville, similar to the Lions, have a pretty bad pass defense, and I think this game is going to be a high scoring. Vegas also agrees because it is one of the highest over-unders of the week with 51. That has about both teams getting 25, 26 points, give or take, and that's about 3 to 4 touchdowns for each of them. The only thing taken away from Jared Goff is Mr. Jamal Williams because that man seems to love getting touchdowns. But I think Jared Goff can have a decent day. Looking at his stats, he does good when he's playing them against bad teams. That's really, that's the most in-depth analysis that I can really go for that.
Yeah.
And Jacksonville is a bad defense. So Jared Goff, if you want to put him on some daily fantasy teams, or if you are in a 2-quarterback league, or if you're just extremely down bad, he can give you decent points this week. I think like 17, 18 I could see from him.
Yeah. Sit him quarterback this week. I don't really know how much I like this one or how much I hate it because it could really go either way and I could be right or be wrong. But it is Geno Smith. I know he's playing against the Rams. It's a division game, so you got that. Division games are usually a little bit more competitive. But last week, the Rams only held Patrick Mahomes to 26 points, and he only had 20 fantasy points. Yeah, 20's good, but for Mahomes, a guy who we're used to seeing 35, 31, 28, 35, 30, 28, that's pretty good for a banged-up Rams team. Geno Smith, he's looked pretty sharp all year. He threw an interception last week. He lost a fumble. He fumbled the week before. He also fumbled the week before that and threw an interception the week before that. So, Geno Smith, yes, he's been kind of sharp all year. He has been committing turnovers, though, and it is going up against a division game against the Rams. I don't remember did they play earlier this year? Let me see. The Rams are only on here once, and they're not on here again.
So they probably play week 18.
That's true. But, I think, again, I don't blame you. You probably do have to start Geno Smith, but if you have the luxury of being able to sit him this week, I don't think it is a bad sit. It is going to be a division game, so it's going to be tough. The Rams defense, they looked kind of good last week. Despite all the bullshit, they only held Kansas City to 26 points, despite the injuries and the reports of them not trying and them kind of giving up. They still held the Chiefs to 26 points. I think that they're going to give Geno Smith a run for his money this week. And just on top of that, the Rams are they're only allowing 1.3 passing touchdowns a game, and they've allowed the 10 fewest points to opposing fantasy football quarterbacks. So if you have the luxury to start Geno Smith, go ahead and sit him this week.
Yeah, Aaron Donald might be out too, so that doesn't help your case.
Yeah, but I
see the vision.
Thank you.
My quarterback sit this week. I have two guys. The first guy I'll say, I'll keep it short and sweet. Brady against the Saints.
Yeah.
Saints just seem to own that man for some reason.
Not earlier in the season.
Next guy is Justin Fields going up against the Packers. I'm a little bit worried. It's really just a skeptical sit. If you have somebody that's just as close, you should sit Justin Fields. If Justin Fields does play this weekend, his shoulder is even a little bit banged up. I feel like he's not going to run the ball as much. And I think that would be smart for the Bears to not let him run the ball that much. There's no need. There's literally no need to play him. There's no need to make him run.
Yep.
The season's over. Chalk it up. Let him sit for the year is the right thing to do. However, rushing him back, all it takes is one hit and he's out, and that's a 0 for your fantasy team. So I'm just skeptical on Justin Fields. I would personally sit him. I have him, and I'm sitting him. Granted, I have Joe Burrow, but Justin Fields is probably a sit this week.
Moving on to stardom running backs, real quick, I just want to throw this guy out there. If he does play and is healthy, Najee Harris going against the Atlanta Falcons. It's an enticing matchup. He scored 3 touchdowns in the past 2 games. He's been doing good in PPR leagues. 10 points against New Orleans, who's pretty good. He had 28 against Cincinnati, and he had 11 in like half a game versus the Colts. So that's pretty good. The Steelers have been trying to get him more involved in the running game. So if he's healthy, start him this week. But moving on to my actual stardom running backs this week. The first guy, David Montgomery against the Green Bay Packers. It was the past 2 weeks without Khalil Herbert, he's been doing good. 21 and 15 fantasy points against the Jets, who are a top rushing defense in the league, and where we thought that the Jets were going to kind of expose Trevor Siemian and just stack the box. It didn't really work. He had 15 carries for 80 rushing yards, and he also had 4 targets in the game for 35 receiving yards. So, I mean, if you can get that out of David Montgomery, that's a good week. Earlier in the season against the Packers, he had 15 fantasy points. That was him splitting with Khalil Herbert. He had 122 rushing yards off 15 attempts and 2 receptions for 14 yards earlier in the season against Green Bay. And we just saw Green Bay get absolutely smoked by Philly. Philly set like 3 different rushing records against them on Monday night. I think that even if it's Trevor Siemian again, I think they're going to make it a point to run the ball. The Packers' defensive line is terrible. We saw Philly expose them. Now, granted, Philly is very good, and the Bears probably aren't even really close. But with what David Montgomery just did to the Jets and what he did to the Packers earlier in the season, I would feel pretty confident starting David Montgomery this week.
My first running back start this week, it might be a little bit too obvious, but I'm doing it anyway. Tony Pollard against the Colts. He didn't do good last week. That's kind of why I felt the need to throw him on there. I think people might be worried that with Zeke being back, Tony Pollard might be kind of off the start. So this is like a public service announcement to not do that.
Yeah.
Cowboys still gave him a lot of touches last week against the Giants. He got the ball about 20 times. Didn't do much with it. Only had about 60 yards. So people that are scared of Tony Pollard and Zeke taking over, he still had 20 touches, and I think that there'll be more success against Indy. Granted, it's because Indy just sucks.
Yeah.
Start Tony Pollard this week.
Another guy, this is just kind of a surprising that I have to say this guy. I texted Ryan about it earlier. This is a guy that was playing really good, and he's literally combined for 8.2 fantasy points in the past 2 weeks. Dameon Pierce of the Houston Texans. The Texans are playing the Browns this week. The Browns have given up the second most fantasy points to running backs all year. Terrible run defense. And yeah, it's a good matchup for Dameon Pierce again. Yes, it is Deshaun Watson's coming back game. It is in Houston. I don't really know how this game's going to go. Deshaun Watson hasn't played in a football game in about 700 days, literally. But I think that you should confidently be able to start Dameon Pierce. I think that Lovie Smith and the Texans are going to kind of want to take advantage to the Browns and how vulnerable their run defense has been. And I think Dameon Pierce really has a bounce-back week this week. He does have a tough schedule coming up, but we're not worried about that. He's got Cleveland this week again. Second most points to running backs in fantasy football. I think this is the Dameon Pierce bounce-back week. He's done it against bad rushing defenses all year. I think he can do it against Cleveland this week. So go ahead and start Dameon Pierce this week. Don't read too much into it. Start Dameon Pierce.
Also starting Jamal Williams this week. He's been very touchdown reliant, and I think that he should be able to get one again this week pretty easily. Going up against a Jacksonville Jaguars defense that isn't too capable of stopping much. This has a pretty high over-under. I see both of these teams scoring in the 20s, and with that being said, Jamal Williams should get his weekly touchdown and have no problems doing it.
Moving on to the sit-em running backs this week. My first sit-em running back is maybe a surprise, Jeff Wilson Jr. The 49ers are only giving up about 60 rushing yards a game to opposing running backs. They just completely neutralized Alvin Kamara last week. I think that this game could turn to a shootout real quick. And if that's the case, Jeff Wilson probably won't be involved. And Jeff Wilson did leave the game in the third quarter with a calf injury. He came back out during garbage time to chew the clock. So it probably isn't too serious, but that's just something to monitor. But I wouldn't be too confident starting Jeff Wilson Jr. this week. Obviously, you got to do what you got to do. If a James Conner or a Dante Foreman's on bye, you might have to if you have those guys. My two sit-em running backs are actually both on the same team for me. So that's kind of a gun down. But yeah, I mean, again, the 49ers, they're giving up about 60 rushing yards a game. They're the best defense against the run in football. So, I mean, yes, again, like I said, you got to do what you got to do. But if you have the luxury to sit Jeff Wilson Jr. this week, go ahead.
Also, if you have the luxury to sit Alvin Kamara, you should probably do that also.
Yeah.
I think I said him last week, and he didn't do much against the Niners, and I don't see him doing much against Tampa. Tampa can stop any running back in football, it seems like. It seems their team is just built for that.
Mm-hmm.
And Kamara is usually a guy that gets shut down by him. Last time they played, Kamara did not play. Probably because he was scared of what was going to happen.
Oh, yeah, he was shaking in his boots.
But Kamara hasn't looked good as of late. Last game he fumbled twice. He's questionable on Yahoo. I don't know how serious that injury is as of right now, as of when we're recording this. But they have a bye next week, so there is a chance that he don't even play. And if he carries a questionable tag into Monday, I would definitely be scared to play him because you're hoping that Kamara plays. And if he doesn't play, you're going to roll the dice with Mark Ingram, which we all know he ain't going to do shit either. So if you have the luxury of playing a different running back instead of a questionable Alvin Kamara against one of the best run defenses in football, you should do it.
Yeah. My next sit-em running back, Devin Singletary, the Buffalo Bills, going up against the New England Patriots, who are only behind the 49ers, the second best team against the run in football and second least amount of points given up to running backs in fantasy football. I know. It's just the track record's there. Whenever the Patriots and Bills play, the Patriots always shut down the run game and make them throw the ball. And the Patriots have been doing that all year, really. I mean, we saw them shut down Dalvin Cook before. Let me see who else they've shut down. They shut down Dalvin Cook on Thanksgiving. They literally held him to 50 yards. I mean, they've shut down the Packers running backs all year. They've shut down Najee Harris earlier in the season. They shut down the Lions running backs, DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams. I mean, the Patriots have been shutting down running backs all year. Look for nothing different. Whenever these two teams play, the Patriots always find a way to stuff the run and make Buffalo throw the ball, which is a dangerous game. But I just don't. I think it's hard to trust Devin Singletary this week, especially given the fact that it is against the Patriots. It is a division game. It is going to be a freezing cold Thursday night in Foxborough. And the Patriots' run defense has literally been out of their mind the whole year this year. So, I just don't think it's a safe start again. This is probably, if you're at the point where you have the luxury to sit one of these guys, any of our starting running backs this week, do it. These are kind of like weekly kind of starts, I guess. I mean, I feel like you could justify Devin Singletary being a weekly start. But, I mean, I just don't think this is a good matchup for him. So I'm saying sit Devin Singletary this week.
My next guy is going to be a guy that you're probably not going to sit because of what he did last week. Miles Sanders going up against Tennessee. I understand what Miles Sanders did last week. It was beautiful. He killed me in fantasy, of course. He has 2 games above 25, and one of them
he won us the week against you.
Yeah. Miles Sanders balled out, but I think Tennessee is going to be a different story. Tennessee, fewest rushing touchdowns and the 3rd fewest rushing yards allowed to running backs. And Miles Sanders, I mean, he hasn't, his good games have been good, and then his bad games have been really bad.
Yeah.
His bad games seem to be Washington. Left hand up seems to own him pretty well, and I think Tennessee can be a kind of a similar story.
Yeah.
He struggles against good defenses. Last week he had 2 touchdowns, which really helped him out a lot. The weeks where he does good, it seems like he's getting a touchdown. Usually that man isn't known for getting touchdowns because Jalen Hurts usually does it all. But this Titans defense isn't going to let him run all over him like they did last week. They're going to see what happened. They're going to take it personal, and they're going to make Jalen Hurts throw the ball. So I would be sitting Miles Sanders if you can. If you can, I completely understand because he's been a stud this year. So I don't blame you for starting him, but it's just not a good matchup. He wouldn't be on daily fantasy teams, in my opinion.
And next up, stardom pass catcher of the week. I had a stardom receiver and a stardom tight end. My stardom receiver this week, Brandon Ayuk. He has scored 5 touchdowns in the last 6 49ers games. He's been the leading receiving leader for the team in 2 or 3 of those 6 games. He was the leading receiver against the Saints last week, 5 receptions for 65 yards. And with the potential of Christian McCaffrey being banged up with his left knee and Elijah Mitchell going on IR, I think that only helps Brandon Ayuk's case because there's more targets. He's still seeing about a 13% target share even with the team fully loaded and healthy. But I think that with the running backs potentially being banged up, that is a plus for him. And they're playing the Dolphins, who are giving up 150 yards to wide receivers a game. It says they aren't giving up a lot of fantasy points, but I mean, Brandon Ayuk's been Jimmy G's like safety valve. Whenever Debo's not open, he's not looking for Kittle. He's been looking for Brandon Ayuk, and we've seen that in the past few 49ers games. So I think you could confidently start Brandon Ayuk this week going up against the Dolphins.
My starting receivers this week, I have 3. I'll do the first 2 right now and knock out the first one real quick. It's the Eagles receivers going up against the Titans. A.J. Brown is probably too obvious, but it's a revenge game for him, so in theory, he should do something. Devontae Smith should also do something. Why? I mentioned it for the Miles Sanders debate. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball, so they're going to have to throw, and the receivers should eat going up against a defense that isn't great against the pass. But the other guy I'll go more into detail with it is Garrett Wilson.
Yeah.
Why? Going up against Minnesota in the Dome, and Mike White's the quarterback. Minnesota doesn't have the best pass defense in football. Their cornerback 1 is Patrick Peterson. And I think Garrett Wilson can have some success for that. Him and Mike White seem to have a pretty good relationship. Garrett Wilson was a dog at the start of the year with Flacco. And then he absolutely disappeared off the face of the earth. And then he kind of started picking back up again. And I think that he will continue that hot streak with Mike White.
Yep. My stardom tight end of this week, Gerald Everett of the Gerald Everett of the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are playing the Raiders. Earlier in the year, week 1, when these 2 teams played, Gerald Everett had a game, bringing in 15 fantasy points. He had 50 yards receiving and a touchdown. I think this could be another big week for him. The Raiders are the 7th worst team against tight ends in fantasy football this year. So that's something to look out for. Gerald Everett did have that week 1 when the Chargers were fully healthy. They had the whole offense, they had the whole offensive line, everything. I think Gerald Everett could see a big week this week. Chargers got to win. They got to win these games. They got to win these games. They should win, especially if they're fighting in the AFC for a playoff spot. So they got to win. I think Gerald Everett's going to be involved this week. They're going to remember how it was week 1. So go ahead and start Gerald Everett if he's available in your league and you need to start a tight end this week. Because if you have like a Cole Kmet or a Greg Dulcich who you've been rocking with, but they've both been... Well, Greg Dulcich has been sucking and Cole Kmet doesn't have a quarterback. So go ahead and pick up Gerald Everett and start him this week.
My final wide receiver start this week is George Pickens going up against Atlanta. Dude's a dog. Atlanta is not. I don't even you have to explain him. He's going up against Atlanta, who doesn't have the best pass defense. And him and Kenny Pickett have a great relationship. George Pickens' schedule is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Going up against 4th, 6th, 10th, 11th, and 6th easiest defenses so far. So it should be a beautiful time to have him on your fantasy team. It's hard to start a Pittsburgh Steelers receiver because obvious damn reasons, and it's hard to watch even their football game. But Pickens is the guy that you want to start, so he's a start this week.
Yeah, my first sit-on wide receiver this week, I'll keep it short and sweet. It's Mike Evans. Marshawn Lattimore's literally coming back off his injury this week.
Just to be with Mike Evans.
Literally lacerated his kidney earlier in the season, and he's back to play Mike Evans. Earlier in the season, yeah, Mike Evans did have 60 receiving yards. I'm pretty sure that's his career high against the Saints. So you got to sit Mike Evans this week. It's just not a good matchup. It's not in the cards. This will be a Chris Godwin or a Julio week.
Yeah. My first sit-on receiver this week is Gabe Davis going up against the Patriots. He's been on and off, hot and cold all season. And the Patriots is a team that you don't really want to bring that into. I'm pretty sure the best that he's done against the Patriots is 41 yards. And that right there is not a good fantasy day.
Nope.
So he's a sit this week for me.
Yeah, and my final sit receiver, Alan Lazard. Yes, this is a questionable one. He's a guy that's been pretty consistent all year. But Christian Watson's been stealing the show for the Packers.
I was going to sit him, and then I saw you did it.
Christian Watson's been stealing the show for the Packers. They're playing against the Bears this week. Earlier, when they played against the Bears, he literally had 13 receiving yards, but he did have a touchdown, so that kind of saved his day. Without the touchdown, he would have had 2 receptions. He would have had 3.3 points without the touchdown. The touchdown saved him. Sit him this week against the Bears. It's been the Christian Watson show, and the running backs have been getting more involved as well, which has kind of been hurting Alan Lazard's production lately. So, again, it is a tough week for bye weeks. Hollywood was back. D-Hop. Even DJ Moore, if you're down that bad, is on bye this week. So, I mean, it is kind of a tougher week, maybe, in terms of, start and sit receivers, because the guys that are missing are probably kind of big. But I would say sit Alan Lazard this week. The production just hasn't been there, and he's kind of taken a backseat role to Christian Watson.
My last sit receiver, I don't love it, but it's Juju against the Bengals.
I thought about this one, too.
I don't love it, but he barely played last week. Kadarius Toney might be back this week, so that's going to take away targets from him also. He's coming off of that concussion. Going up against the Bengals, it ain't a great matchup. I think they're going to score a lot of points, but the Chiefs love to spread the ball around. That's one of the worst things about the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Seems like the only guys on the Chiefs that you can confidently have are Mahomes and Kelsey.
Yep.
My man Pacheco balled out, and then they brought in Melvin Gordon, the worst running back in football.
Yep.
Yeah, that concludes it, though. Sit Juju if you want. It's just not a safe play. I can see him doing good. It's just not a safe play.
Yeah, subscribe, comment any questions you guys have below, any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, and we'll see you guys tomorrow with our best bets.
See you.
Peace.